All right, everyone, we start off today naturally talking about the potential DOJ criminal probe into Donald Trump. This is being reported initially by the Washington Post. That's potential warning sign number one, because WaPo, of course, is part of the propaganda apparatus of the deep legacy media, like as in directly coordinating with Biden's people and with various other entities within the deep state at large. That's problem number one. Problem number two is, of course, this is an anonymous sources say article. 4 people familiar with the matter are claiming that there's an active DOJ criminal probe into Trump, specifically over electors and claims of ballot fraud and things like that. Now, there's a further problem that I want to address, and I don't see a lot of people, either pro or anti-Trump, really discussing this. The fact that a probe is issued is not an indictment. It's a search for evidence, and ultimately in and of itself is not particularly meaningful. The DOJ could say, well, we think this person's engaged in fraud of some sort. They start a probe. 5 years later, in some cases, it can take a very, very long time, regardless of whether there's a lot of evidence or very little or not at all. It can take a very, very long time for these things to wrap up anyway. Why do I get the feeling that this is going to be one of those situations, which we saw with Trump previously, courtesy of the legacy media, big tech, the deep state at large, where an informal inquiry into him results in no charges, it results in no legal action, but it results in perpetual leakings of information, like that whether there's a probe or not. You can now have an instance where the Washington Post sends one of its people to the phone booth in D.C. to call in an anonymous report to their own office and say, well, yeah, I've got the real skinny here. I've got to remain totally anonymous here. Yeah, the probe is turning up all sorts of good shit. Here's a list of things that the probe has turned up so far. They don't need to be real. It doesn't need to be anything that's actually factual in any sense. It can just be a complete horseshit charade. We've seen this before. We saw this with Piskay. We saw this with numerous tales of Donald Trump engaging in various perversions. We saw it with the Stormy Daniels problem. We've seen it a million times. I would like to juxtapose this with the apparent inaction of the federal government with regards to Hunter Biden's laptop, showing that Joe Biden provably engaged in illegal quid pro quo behavior and that his son certainly conducted himself in maybe a dubious manner, engaging in half a dozen or more felonies. We know this. We've got all the evidence. It's been forensically checked. It's been gone through by partisan and nonpartisan individuals. It's even been admitted to by the legacy media at this point because they could no longer keep up the lie, the shtick, the claim that it wasn't real. With Donald Trump, what we have effectively is a partisan committee, the J6 hoax committee, claiming that there was an insurrection where there is none and falls short of the legal definition. There was no illegal effort to overturn the election or anything like that. What you have effectively here is a blue anon conspiracy theory with regards to what happened on and thereafter January 6th. How can you, if there's a criminal probe at all, and again, I've got to be suspicious that this is potentially not even true. If there is a criminal probe, what do you expect actually to find? Even the J6 committee, which has virtually unfettered legal capabilities and has conducted itself in a manner that violates several constitutional amendments, at least arguably, has gone from Trump specifically planned, orchestrated, and fomented an attempted coup to, well, Trump just didn't do enough at the right time. He should have acted quicker. No, he didn't actually incite anything, incitement being, again, a legal term. He clearly did not plan for this. We have the Pentagon memo with Milley and Miller that proves that. What do you expect to find? If you're looking into Donald Trump after the election, contacting like the state attorney general in Georgia and people like that, and asking things to be looked into, if you look past the obtuse language that could be considered to be dubious if you already don't like Trump, there's really no meat on the bones. It's just a pile of yellowed bones, just like Barbara Bush. That was a great old meme. I should post it later again. Link in the description, archived, of course. I'm just not seeing anything here that proves that the probe exists in the first place. I'm seeing a claim by anonymous sources through a legacy media outlet known to be untrustworthy, known to be working directly with Biden's people. And I get the feeling, again, that the whole purpose of this isn't whether there's a probe or not. We'll even get past that. It doesn't even matter. Whether there's a probe or not, the whole point is in the lead up to the midterms, number one, and certainly to 2024, number two, to try to force a primary in the Republican Party. I believe that that is the goal. All of the things that we've seen over the last few months, in my mind, if I think strategically, if I think like the enemy, use that term loosely, deep state's everyone's enemy, but it's not really a partisan force. It just happens to lean towards the Democrats now more because MAGA is a thing. If I think the way that they would think if they were trying to fuck around and make sure that there was another controlled opposition election. So you have a controlled opposition Republican who pretends to be marginally populistic, but they get in there and they're basically Bush 2.0, versus some random Democrat. It could be Biden, Kamala, Pete Buttigieg, Newsom, some authoritarian Democrat neoliberal who will screw the left wing, by the way. They'll still get behind him, and it'll be funny to see them continue to impotently whine and complain, but that's what'll happen. If you want Obama v. Romney 2.0, you have to try to prevent Trump from being the nominee. The problem: he has legendary amounts of in-party support and is above 50% even in packed fields against all other Republican candidates. Second problem, many states would suspend their primaries and simply allocate their delegates to Trump anyway. He would become the candidate. If you're scratching your head trying to figure out how to defend potentially against a Trump candidacy, in which in a matchup against Joe Biden, he's actually up by several points. That is, by the way, nearly a 10-point swing in overall support towards Trump if he faces off against Biden. He fares somehow better against Kamala. Buttigieg, he's positioning himself. We're not sure that he's even going to be an entity. Newsom has no swing state advantage. It would make the race even more politicized. If you don't have a candidate who you could credibly honk into the office, because even the mainline polling is incapable of missampling so much that you could scratch together logic behind how you won. If Trump has risen in support, which he has, and if you had gone into a tailspin with regards to support, and you do not expect, because you're not trying to make it better, you do not expect the economy to pick up, you do not expect any major foreign policy successes. You understand that the gig is up on your deep state end. How do you fend off Trump? There's no logical methodology by which you can claim that he wasn't the winner in such an election. It would be impossible for him to lose. Logistically speaking, statistically speaking, the registration advantage, the turnout differential, the in-party support, the enthusiasm, literally everything lines up like goddamn faded stars during some strange cosmic alliance to make sure that the Republican candidate wins. You have to prevent Trump from being the nominee. We know that he'll break the toys. We know he's populistic. We've already seen him as president. We've certainly seen him in the lead up and thereafter. He's been very consistent. What you need to do is force a Republican primary. You need to try to force Trump aside and get some controlled opposition, a Romney-style candidate in there. There are rumblings of Liz Cheney attempting to run for office. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to fuck around with that. Why do you think they're simultaneously trying to attack Steve Bannon? And they'll try to throw the book at him to keep him out of politics as long as possible. I've been now talking for almost a year about Steve Bannon's particular play, which is to go in at the local level and energize people, get them knocking on doors, to overhaul precinct captains and vote watchers and shit like that had been held 90% by neocons. He's overhauled thousands and thousands of these local positions, not to mention all of the damage to the neocons that's been done at the state level. If, therefore, you don't have a massive bubble of outrage to front at Donald Trump, he will automatically become the nominee. Then you have to do some honking in the general election. But it'll be too obvious because the gap is too large. It's not like in 2020 when you could at least point to polling and say, well, Trump was down a bit in the final polling and everything just aligned. The votes were in just the right spot at just the right time to cause the election to go to Joe Biden. There's no plausible methodology by which Joe Biden can seek re-election and actually win at this point. The Republicans could probably field Jeb Bush and win. And that's the point. They want to shove Trump aside and anyone else who is actually anti-establishment, actually populistic. They want to get in a controlled opposition candidate. This is probably their best methodology to try to do so. It's a ploy. It's a ruse. I doubt that the probe even exists. And if it does, again, remember, it's just a probe. The police, the FBI, the DOJ, etc. can look into a person. That doesn't necessitate they've done anything wrong. When I look at Donald Trump over the last few years, he's been investigated by Senate Intel. He's been investigated by the House J6 committee. He's been investigated by the IRS. He's been investigated by virtually every deep state vestige of the government now for more than half a decade. So far, nothing. They have turned up not one crime, not one misdemeanor, nothing. He's been winning fucking legal suits, like against Stormy Daniels, etc., and the people that keep targeting him keep falling off. Meanwhile, most of the people that are still allies of him, they're free and clear. They're not in jail. They're free to go around and do what they want. They're clean too. I've said years ago that I expected that in the lead up to running for president, Trump probably stopped taking any deductions he was capable of taking on his taxes, and he completely cleaned the books. Any weird business dealings haven't been going on probably since the goddamn 2000s because he's been planning this for so long. He dotted all the I's, he crossed all the T's. I do not believe that he broke the law. The J6 committee can continue to bloviate and bellow in impotent rage about how Donald Trump didn't do enough. Donald Trump knew what he was doing. Donald Trump ignored military advice. He caused an insurrection. None of these things are legally actionable. I have a feeling this is just yet another one of these fucking political ploys, and it will be amplified by shills online. By the way, you're going to see plenty of people, especially DeSantis fans, some of which are organic actually, saying, oh, this is a reason why we can't have Trump in there, because just think this will be a selling point. You watch over the next few days what happens. This will be another major selling point. They'll say something along the lines of, hey, we can't nominate Donald Trump. It's too dangerous because there's this probe going on, hush hush, that we can't actually prove even exists, honk honk. So don't nominate him, because if he gets nominated, he might get indicted and end up in a jail cell. And then what will the Republicans do? The Democrats will run roughshod over us in 24. It's a goddamn lie. It's a goddamn trick. That's about all. Peace out.